What's up, class, and welcome to another lesson in the No Mod Shop class here on the Skooled Zone. Today I have a compilation video for you. It's actually a sequel to my original 15 miscellaneous tips video that I posted well over a year ago. I do get around to the videos that I promise, even if it takes me a year sometimes. Now, just like the last one, which I'll link down below in the iCard above, these are discoveries I made either after I posted a video on a particular topic but didn't merit their own isolated videos, or they're tips and tricks suggested by you guys, the class. So if you're one of the viewers that suggested one of these tips, I'll credit you in the description below. Now, with some of the tips, there were like a dozen or more people that made the exact same suggestion, but if these were singular suggestions, then you'll see your name listed as a token of appreciation. And speaking of appreciation, it's time for a peek at this month's Wall of Fame. As you've probably seen in other videos, I feature the names of my amazing Patreon supporters once a month on this here Wall of Fame, and here are my fantastic Patreons this month. I'm immensely appreciative to all you guys for helping me get a little closer to doing YouTube full time. And thanks to their generous support, I'm less than $200 away from getting a PS4 Pro so I can feature PlayStation exclusives and also share the team-up perks in Fallout 76. If you too want to help support the channel, jump on over to my Patreon page and become a part of the Student Council. Okay, on to the tips. So the first follow-up tip comes from the video I did on where to get building supplies. I mentioned earlier in that video that one of the most common ways to get materials was to scrap weapons and armor. You drop the ones you want to scrap on the ground and then you scrap them instead of store them. But I warned this method also inadvertently increases the settlement size limit. Like, that's the secret to that technique. Normally that's not a bad thing, you'll probably end up doing it anyway. But sometimes you only want to increase the size limit of a settlement little by little until you're finished building, and no more than necessary because it does affect the frame rate performance, and too large of a settlement can cause game crashes. So if you want to scrap stuff and you don't want it to affect the size limit, you can actually scrap the items from within the workbench itself. I'll show you real quick. Got some hunting rifles here that I was going to scrap. Now, you'll need to use the appropriate workbench for each item that you want to scrap. For example, a weapons workbench for weapons, an armor workbench for armor, etc. Doing it this way is sometimes easier than dropping the items too, and it doesn't affect the size limit. Now, a lot of you may know this tip already, but we're just getting started here, right? So, tip number 2, you can have your single crops spread all around your settlement and still have them attended to by settlers for harvesting. All you have to do is start them off in an area where they're grouped together and assign a settler to farm them. I think usually around 6 plants or so at a time per settler, but after that you can pick them up and move them wherever you want. I mentioned this in my Covenant build, and it worked really well having the mute fruit trees spread around all over, as just decoration. One tree here, one tree there. Your farmers will just wander around and tend to each tree as far as the animation goes, but the plants will still be listed as being tended to. This works especially well with mute fruit trees that you want to use as decoration, but also still have them yield food for your settlers. Oh, and in case you didn't know, you can also assign robots to farm as well. As you can see, I've got 6 of them lined up here. Tip number 3. In one of my Overland Station videos, I wondered out loud why I could only see a certain number of settlers in the area, but there was an extra one listed in the stats. Well, several of you let me know that provisioners count towards the total number of settlers, even though they're not around, if they originated from that settlement. Now that got me thinking, it might be possible to select one settlement that you don't use that much or don't want a lot of settlers hanging around in, and make that your central provisioner hub. Then link that settlement to all the other settlements that you want to connect workshops. That way, the provisioners don't count towards your total settlers and other settlements where you actually want to see a densely populated settlement, you know what I mean? Now, it's kind of hard to find the provisioners to reassign them once they're out and about on their routes, but if I was to start a new game, I would probably make something like Outpost Montoya or Hangman's Alley, the Pony Express of the Commonwealth, or the Brahmin Express as the case may be, and then have all your provisioners route through there, or whatever settlement you want to use that's either hard to farm or hard to build up. You know what I'm saying? Now, I do want to make 2 amendments to this tip, just in case you didn't know. First of all, animals count as settlers, so the dog is there, but you're probably still wondering then why there are 5. It's because this settler right here is not an actual settler. Let me explain. So once in a while, you'll get a settler that will wander into your settlement without getting assigned there, and they'll be just passing on through. But if you immediately assign that person, that settler, to something to do in your settlement, for example, she wandered through, said, I'm just passing through, or some line like that, and I immediately assigned her to the bar, okay? I just threw up a bar there and assigned her to it, thinking I'd put the bar elsewhere once I get the rest of this settlement built out. And she has stayed since. In fact, she's so temporary, she wasn't even wearing clothes. I gotta find some clothes she can actually appropriately wear. But that is another way to acquire settlers without having them count towards your total limit, which is the opposite of the provisioner effect. Tip number 4. In a lot of these videos, you've seen this ghost water pump. Well, it turns out it is a partial glitch, but I understand how it happens now. What it is that if you're traveling with a companion and they start an animation, such as pumping this water pump, and there's a few other things they can do, maybe cranking a cooking station or something like that. And if you then fast travel away while they're in the middle of the animation, then when you return, it'll continue that animation. Now, as soon as I start pumping this water pump myself, it'll stop. But it's just been so cool having it pump by itself that I didn't want to ruin it. So if you want to purposely achieve this effect, or any workshop item that has a built-in animation, you know, such as a workout bench, or anything that you want to have animate on its own, then that's how you do it. You assign a settler to the item to get with the animation, and then fast travel away, and then the animation will continue when you return. In fact, if some of you guys want to list down below some of the workshop items that have a character-generated animation to them, then it might give some of your fellow classmates some ideas on things that they can do to animate on their own, you know. The workout bench looks a little weird because the weightlifting itself, but there may be some other items besides the water pump that might look kind of cool. I mean, for me, this water pump looks like, you know, it could naturally be pumping itself. I mean, that's what oil rigs do when they're pumping oil out of the ground, you know what I mean? Tip number 5. A lot of people still ask how they get the trade caravan post as a buildable item. There are actually a few items in the vanilla game that you don't get immediate access to unless you either find the magazines or complete their quests. I'll link to a video below that I made about where you can get all the build perk magazines, you know, for those of you who don't have them yet. But there are also a few quests as well. To unlock the trade caravan post, which periodically brings named traders directly to your settlements, instead of having to go seek them out randomly in the Commonwealth, you have to start by heading to Bunker Hill and complete 2 quests. The first one is given by Deb, called Traffic Jam. I won't spoil these quests for you, but once you complete that one, Deb will send you to Kessler to complete a quest called Prep School. Once you complete Traffic Jam and Prep School, the trade caravan post will become available to build at all your settlements. Tip number 6, another example of a settlement item that's unlocked through a quest, are the elegant portrait paintings that you've seen in some of my builds. I use these to represent everything from like Robert House to conspirators in the Salem witch hunt. You've probably used them in your builds too if you've completed the Cabot House quest. In fact, you may not even know that's where they came from. So if you don't have those extra painting selections, then you'll want to visit the Cabot House and complete the entire storyline. In fact, I believe it actually begins with Edward Deegan at either the Third Rail or the Dugout Inn, with the special delivery quest. Completing that will advance you to the quest where you get inside the Cabot House and get a series of other quests to complete. Tip number 7. After I posted the video on how to get rid of respawning corpses, a viewer suggested another possible way that I thought was worth mentioning. He suggested if you pick up the cannibalism perk, you can eat the corpses. He tells me they won't disappear immediately, but when the cell resets, they'll be gone for good. Now, this is the only one of the tips I haven't tested out myself. I don't have any current open perks on my character right now, but it sounds very promising. And if any of you have had success with this method or not, let us know down in the After School Club below. If it works, that would be a much easier way than dragging the corpses all over Kingdom Come, you know? Tip number 8. So some of you may know this already, but you can use the pillar glitch on the sliding rail car doors. Now that can make for some really interesting tricks since they're both like walls and doors at the same time. I'm not even sure that settlers can actually open them. One idea I have here is that I'm actually using them as a sort of low walls, like railings that can actually slide open to let in provisioners and things like that. Maybe I can create like a low fence around the sides, you know what I mean? But I'm sure you guys can come up with all kinds of cool ideas with this concept. Tip number 9, speaking of lights, you can stack lights on top of each other if you want to make an area exceedingly bright. For example, the string lights are really good for this, and you can do this with fire barrels as well. You can also do this with cycling lights, but if you want to do that, it might be a good idea to hook them up to electricity first, manually change their color, and then pillar glitch them back on top of each other. Now this could be really cool with the Wi-Fi glitch. In fact, you could change the color of a single light with a series of switches going to each cycling light set to a different color superimposed on top of each other, or even combine them together, you know, like a purple and blue light mixed together, you know, or other combinations like I did with the neon lights. So let that sink in for a second. The possibilities could be pretty phenomenal. Tip number 10. Although you can't use the pillar glitch on most constructed flooring surfaces, you can actually use the pillar glitch on the barn foundation blocks. This could be incredibly useful for interior decorating, and although you can't replace the blocks with another material like you can in Fallout 76, which is a very cool feature, you can just delete the blocks afterwards if you don't want them there. It's also possible in some circumstances to put down a garden plot from the Wasteland Workshop DLC and use that to sync objects with the pillar glitch. Now, it's not a guarantee which of these techniques will work in every scenario because a lot of it depends on how the game is calculating the combination of underlying materials. However, it does open up new possible tools in your toolbox, and having these new tools also opens up a lot of creative ideas that you guys are welcome to share down below in the After School Club. Tip number 11. A somewhat similar technique to the last tip, the garden plots can also be used to qualify as dirt for things like crops, of course, and the powered water pumps. It's found in the resources section under Miscellaneous. Once built, a water pump can be moved elsewhere because it's already past the initial dirt prerequisite, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, the garden plot can't be built at a few specific locations, such as Home Plate, Boston Airport, and a Mechanist Lair. But that leads into tip number 12. Now this technique can be done with plants too if you use the rug glitch in creative ways. This actually works best with the vault flooring, so I'll demonstrate on that, but like the previous tips, it may work on other flooring too, depending on how the combination of underlying materials is calculated by the game. So you simply place down a rug or mat, the garden plot, and then situate the plant on the edge of the garden plot so it drops down and is actually sitting on the mat. Again, you're tricking the game into thinking that the dirt prerequisite is met, and then you can store the garden plot and take the plant wherever you want on the mat or rug. Tons of creative possibilities here for interior decorating. You could even put the mute fruit trees in planters, which leads into tip number 13. So remember that cool looking bucket chair technique I did in my manufacturing video?
Nice.
Let's create an awesome looking planter for our freeform mute fruit tree here. Oh, and by the way, combine this technique with tip number 3, and you can actually have settlers tend to the plants in the planters. If you want, that is. And it'll count towards the food yield in your settlement and not just be for decoration. You might see the settlers sort of clipping through the floor a little, trying to reach the roots, but that's not a deal breaker for me. Tip number 14. The Wi-Fi glitch has completely changed the way I build in Fallout 4, as it probably has for those of you who have seen my video on that. There's another way to do the Wi-Fi glitch that might make it a little easier to remember. Now, depending on which variant you use, the most important thing to remember when using the Wi-Fi glitch is to keep track of what is invisibly connected to what. Because you don't have the visual cue of the wires anymore, it might be hard to remember your more complexly wired settlements, especially when you get all sorts of switches involved. Whenever I do really complex things with the wire glitch, routed all across my settlement, I usually take notes, sort of like an electrician's diagram. If you do that, then you can eventually get to the point where you have a switch up in your penthouse suite that closes a garage door way down in the front of your settlement in case of an attack, and simultaneously activates traps and releases caged enemies and stuff, or maybe an intricate light box display that also shoots off fireworks like in my mosh pit build from last year. Links to all these videos, of course, in the description below. And tip number 15. Bottle caps have never been something you could drop in the game and decorate with, which is unfortunate because they can be used for lots of cool decorating things, ranging from like checkers on a checkerboard to having lie around on a merchant's or bartender's countertop as loose change. But there actually is a way to get your hands on loose caps as well as clusters of caps to decorate with. Simply arm a bottle cap mine, detonate it, and then use the caps that litter the floor as your decoration. Boom! How cool is that? Now, I do have to warn you that I just tested this technique before I made this video. That's why it's the last tip. So, I don't know if the bottle caps disappear after the cell zone respawns. I doubt they'd be picked up by settlers, but that is another possibility. So if down the road you guys want to return to this video and let us know if you're still seeing the caps where you put them, or if they vanish, then that would be extremely helpful. But the tip definitely works in the short term if you want to take screenshots or a video of your settlement for your channel or for building contests and such. Alright class, that wraps up 15 more settlement tips to make your settlement building easier in Fallout 4. And the cool thing is, I actually have 15 more ready to go for the next time I do part 3. I probably won't wait a year this time, but I am still going to be throwing in the occasional Fallout 76 building lesson too. So it won't be right around the corner. But I really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching these videos and sharing them around. Be sure to throw a like on the video if it helped, sub for more awesome settlement tips like this, and continue to email me great suggestions to include in future videos. I always give credit where credit is deserved. See you in the next video. Happy building, and class dismissed.